All right, everybody, welcome to the April Idea Share for Key Ministry. My name is Beth Golick, and I'm joined by my colleague, Catherine Boyle, who's our Director for Mental Health Ministry. And it's Holy Week. There's a lot going on in all of our areas. Personally, we're also gearing up for Disability in the Church, which is the conference that's happening April 28th and 29th. So I know many of you are involved in that as well. So this, as always, is just a conversation just to brainstorm, encourage each other, so learn from each other. So if anybody would like to start and share what's going on at your church or in your ministry, in your family, whatever you'd like to share, I will just open it up. Meekins.
I'm going to wind her up and let her go.
Okay, so there were two events that I want to share with you, but I'll split them up so other people can talk. But the first one was we had this really cool, and we've shared this before, iKids Easter event. So iKids is the name of the disability ministry in our church. And it's about the idea of we are made in God's image. Yeah, that's why. So we had this event, and the attendees are those who have disabilities and their siblings. So the siblings don't get left out. They get to come too, and they're part of our church, but they're also part of the community. And so we've built up this database of people in the community who can't wait for these events to happen. And there's 3 events each year. And so Easter was one of them, and that was this past Saturday. So as the children arrive, they get paired with a volunteer. And most of the volunteers are Liberty students. And they could be in psychology or special ed or regular ed, counseling, women's ministries, family and child development, all kinds of different degrees that would bring them to this experience and want to experience it. I talked to one of the young ladies who said, yeah, I signed up and then I got scared because I've never done this before and I didn't know what I was going to encounter. And at the end of the day, she said, I'm really, really glad I was here. And she's in family, what is it called? Family and child development. Okay. And I thought, how perfect is that? You know, and she will have a different, you know, add something else to her understanding. So, so it's volunteer guided, and they go through different activities. And they kind of divide it so that everybody's not in the same room at the same time, because we have probably, I don't know, 50 families maybe that come to this.
Good number.
And there's a lot of people. And by the time you count up all the volunteers and all the kids and their siblings and families, the parents are allowed to stay if they want to, or it can be a drop-off event. So it just depends on what the parents feel comfortable with. So we've got lots of different families, some with parents, some without. So it was really fun to watch everybody go through all the different stations. So we have the Easter story from the Bible, of course, and then we have the Easter egg hunt, and they make that as easy as possible for the kids. And so everybody is successful in this thing. There's a train, we have a train, and it is really cool. And we run it around the gym because there's a Christian school at our church. So it's a huge area where kids can get on the train and ride around this big room, and it's really fun for them. And then there's 3 different bouncy houses, and then there's stations, activity stations. So there's Legos in one, there's dinosaurs in another, that large Connect 4 type game. I don't think it's called Connect 4, but the big one, and beanbag bag toss game and crafts. So here's a really cool story that came out of that, other than the one I just shared with you about the Liberty student who was really glad that she was there. So it was the response of a staff person and a volunteer when a mom came by and asked how her son did. So this is something that we've been trying to work in our church for some time now. How do we communicate to parents? And of course, you know, we are in parent ministry. So it is our desire, our calling to make sure that parents get supported. Okay, so I was, you know, my ears are like, my antenna is up, because I'm like, okay, how are they going to answer this? Because I happen to know that this young man struggled during the time of this event. He was a drop off, and he really struggled. And he looks like an adult male. He's a teenager, but he's older, and he's big. He's just a big guy. And he got paired with a young woman who also is on the autism spectrum. And so the combination of those two was something that we were all watching very carefully to make sure that this poor girl was not totally overwhelmed with the student that she had with her. And it turned out that he could only tolerate the activities because he's very sensitive, sensory sensitive. He could only tolerate the activities for probably 15 or 20 minutes. And then it was up to everybody to figure out, okay, what are we going to do next with this young man? And so it ended up that he needed to walk away from that area. So the director looked at Tom and said, I need you. So he just was walking by and talking to parents, and she said, could you just walk with them? You know, wherever this young man needs to walk in the building. Is a huge building, so there's lots of places to walk.
He needed quiet. He needed to calm down, and the hallways were the perfect place to walk.
So Tom did that for a while, and then he got a call from the director who was like, how is he doing? Where are you? You know, is it all going well? And it turned out then you ended up in the sensory room, right? Because he likes to do certain things and he's familiar with it. He is part of our church, so he's familiar with the room. Anyway, it was just a beautiful time, really, in just accommodating somebody who was at the event, giving that mother a break, right? So she comes in and they ask the question, and I watched them answer, and they said everything that was positive about that time for him, for this young man. And I was so blessed by that. So I had to tell them, because, you know, I don't not tell people things when that's on my heart. And so I just said to them, do you realize the gift you just gave her? And it just makes me emotional every time, because it wasn't about him not being successful in this particular venue, in this particular activity. It was about him being successful in what he needed to do that day. So I just had to share that with you all, because we've been working on this with our volunteers for quite a while now, and helping them to understand what do you say, you know, and how do you say it, and what can you look for? So we had a long discussion after that about finding the silver linings in everything, so that you can communicate those things. And we're not lying to the parent, because he did have a positive experience, because we did listen to his needs and they were taken care of. So it was really cool. So I just had to share that with you guys.
I love that, Julie and Tom. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. There's so much that I heard in there. So first of all, for those that don't know, Tom and Julie are part of a very large church that is next to Liberty University. So they have done such a fantastic job of incorporating university students into their ministry, which is a win-win as far as I'm concerned. So that's incredible. I love the story you shared about the volunteer, how she was nervous, but then, you know, like really had a great experience. I love what you said about how, like, by modeling and pouring into the volunteers about the importance of how they're interacting with parents and the message that they're sharing. That's so important, because, you know, as you all know, parents often only hear the negative in so many different experiences. So that's so cool. Tom, I love how you were kind of showing the ministry of presence, like you were there to just be there with that young man, and
at the right place at the right time.
Yep. So I love that. But I'm super curious. You have a train? That one I was like, what?
It's an electric train. It has the engine, and it has about 4 or 5 cars where kids can sit in, and just goes
adults,
round and
it
around.
can hold adults too. So it's very well built, and it comes out whenever there's a special event. And what's cool too is the special events are often on Saturdays. So then the next morning, the train is available for all the littles in the, you know,
Sunday school classes.
Yeah, all of the classes. So that's fun for them, because they're like, oh, good, it's train time again. It's really fun.
That's great. That's great. Well, thank you for sharing. So they promised us a Meekin sandwich. So we'll hear their other story after we hear, after we have some few other conversations. So thanks for kicking us off. Who else would like to share what's going on? Al. Oh, good. You stopped your
If I start glitching, I'll turn myself off the camera. Yeah, I'm Al. I'm in northern New Jersey. I'm a parent of a child with autism named John. as well as a disability advocate in this area. There's tons of stuff going on in churches and things like that. I went to an Easter egg hunt last night or yesterday. There's other Easter egg hunts all over the place. There's been a bunch of respite events from buddy breaks to different churches doing their own thing. So it's very encouraging what's happening in this area, as well as some businesses, cafes and restaurants. And there's a tea shop going on. I discovered, so there's some good stuff in northern New Jersey. God gave me a dream, a literal dream, when I was sleeping earlier this year. And out of that is this vision trip I'm doing to France next month. And there's an autism conference going on in the Paris area. I'm in conversation with people in France now. I was a missionary in France for 20 years, so I was there a long time. We came back because of our son's autism 8 years ago and not having much there, but it's looking like God's been moving there. And so I hope with our new association, JP's Ability, hope to be able to see what's happening there and resource the French church and kind of full circle France and then America disability, and then getting back to France and helping there. So that's exciting what's happening and the doors that are happening there that I didn't expect 8 years ago when we left.
That is very cool. And like only God could work out that whole thing. So that's incredible, Al. So if you're not following Al on like Facebook or getting his newsletter, I highly recommend you do. He's a great guy, up to a lot of interesting things, and we'll definitely want to hear more about your trip to France. So thank you, Al. Who else wants to share?
So I asked him if he had reached out to you. He said he had, and it was clarifying.
I'm having a hard time hearing. Is everybody else having a hard time hearing? Yes, okay. Are you able to?
Yeah, he
Your
didn't
mic?
talk to me. He just declined the planning center and told me that he was planning on leaving.
I don't think
So-
she's trying to talk to us. She's
Not
talking about
to us.
planning center.
Okay, I'm gonna mute her then. Okay. Who else has something to share?
I'll share.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia.
Many of us may have been on the last call, and I said we did not do, am I the only one that's freezing though?
I saw you were freezing for me. Try again.
Yeah,
Now you seem
okay.
better.
We didn't do Night to Shine this year because we were doing another event. We were doing an event called An Evening of Elegance, and it truly was that. We had almost, we had about 102, 105
Oh, no, she's-
participants, 120 some parents, and 130. So there were about 300 people there. They dressed up, they danced, and they ate. It was fabulous. They
I
had
love
a
it.
great time. I got so many responses from parents that really enjoyed it, and how the participants enjoyed it and everything. So it was really a wonderful event, and now they want us to do something twice a year instead of just the once a year. So we are incorporating that into our plans for next year. And it's been great. The respite program that we have been doing, how we switched, because we were doing buddy break. This was our year to reimagine everything.
Mhm.
And so we have, we've divided the groups up to children, youth and young adult, and adults. So we have those running. Children come on the fourth Saturday. The youth and young adult come on the second Saturday, and the adults come on the third Friday, which has been growing. We have about 10 children who come, which has been exciting. And this month, for our regular ministry meeting, we are doing something called Autism, in recognition of Autism Month. We did a painting activity about a month ago. So this month we are doing an art display where we're putting all of the individuals painted items on display so that they can have an art show. So that's what we're doing now.
I love it. So many cool ideas. I'm so happy to hear about your Evening of Elegance. I love the name of it. That sounds fantastic. And Sylvia, like you, I'm just kind of rethinking all the things. It's been really fun I think it was this call last month or the month before that a few of you shared the word reimagine, and that really hit me. So I know one of the things in my church job as director of disability engagement, one of the things I'm looking at right now, and you could literally see my whiteboard up there. Well, I can't, let's see, there we go. I'm rethinking how we're doing our respite events. So now we are going to divide it up in age categories. And I really want to do an optional parent event, like dinner, whatever, at the same time. So I'm just curious, for those of you who do respite events or know of similar type events in your area, do you offer some kind of optional parent activity? I'd like to hear if anybody has anything to share.
Our parents drop
Alice,
and
oh,
run.
go ahead, Sylvia.
Our parents drop and run.
Drop and run, okay. And which is what we have done too. But Allison, I want to hear, and then I'll share an idea that I'm kicking around.
So hi, I'm Alison. I'm in Pennsylvania, and yeah, so at our respite nights, we've done a couple of things. Invariably, parents drop and run, but if we've tried to do something like an information evening on something like financial support or financial and legal side, we've tried to schedule it in an evening during the week, maybe after a Sunday service, but then we've also scheduled it during respite time so that parents get sort of half a respite, but half a time to actually go, because then that usually afforded that both parents could attend. And then the other thing we've done is, I was noticing quite a few, especially single mums, sort of lurking in the parking lot. So we offer now like just a refreshment area in a comfortable section of the church, just to say, hey, you can come and go in that area as and when you want during the evening. So it's not very formal, but hopefully it meets some of the needs. But yeah, I was thinking similar thing, what to do sometimes.
Yeah, so I'm with you, like not a formal thing and not like a program, but so like one thought I had was have like a community group from the church host a barbecue. Like they would do the grilling and parents can just go over, hang out in, we have a room that's kind of like a cafe-ish kind of thing. And just chill, like just enjoy each other's company, if they want to come, and we'll feed them dinner. Another idea is have like a kind of create a little bit of a spa-like atmosphere, maybe chair massages, that kind of thing, and just like refreshments. And again, just for people to hang out. So, okay, well, if you have any more ideas, I'd love to hear them.
I think that's wonderful.
Oh,
of course I do. But seriously, I think the more that we can love on those parents in some kind of way that doesn't require anything from them is going to be a real blessing. So kudos to you, Beth. I think that's awesome. And
yeah, not me, but and I'll throw out one other idea, and maybe not everybody agrees with this, but I was at a meet and greet with all different kinds of organizations and therapies and that kind of thing who serve the disability community. And I met somebody who runs a yoga practice. And again, I know not everybody agrees with yoga, but and she offers free classes for individuals who are parenting children with disabilities. The problem is they have a hard time getting childcare to go to these free classes. And so we're talking, she's going to come, I think what we're going to do is she's going to come and we'll have the space and she'll have her class, again, totally optional. And then we'll do refreshments during one of these respite events. So if, parents want to take advantage, they can. So that's just an idea. Oh wait, we have some things going on in the chat. Okay, so yeah, so Tina says they did yoga for adults with disabilities. It was amazing seeing them trying something new. Yes. All right, and I missed Andrea. Sorry, I don't know. I don't even see. Oh, there you are, Andrea. Would you like to share something? Sorry, I missed your thing in the chat earlier.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I don't want to interrupt. My fears when people say, who's next? And then two people are talking and then I feel bad. But I am Andrea from Columbia, South Carolina, and I work at Eastminster Presbyterian, and we are starting a disability ministry. I am not from like a church background. I was a special education teacher. I was an early autism interventionist before that. And I was a behavior therapist before that. So I am very much enmeshed in the disability community, and helping parents is a particular passion of mine. And we're very much in the early stages. So right now we have our biggest thing that we do is monthly young adult events, where our kiddos come and we do a devotional, we eat, we have songs, dance, craft, whatever. But I am particularly interested in growing our ministry and what that might look like, how practically how I do that. I want to have some kind of training, obviously, for both current employees that may or may not work with children with disabilities, and then also for our volunteers. And I'm just feeling a little bit overwhelmed by what that looks like. I'm starting this whole thing and everyone's really excited and we have a lot of engagement, and they're looking to me for direction. And I'm kind of like, I don't know where to go. And I had intended to go to the disability conference, but my husband actually had a really horrible heart attack in December, and he has a device pumping his heart until he can get a heart transplant. So obviously I cannot leave him and my two little kids to go to that conference. So I'm hoping that maybe someone will have some kind of concrete direction, or another conference that might be closer. So I'm in South Carolina, like I said. So if anyone has any ideas, I would really appreciate it.
Wow, well, that's a lot.
Sorry.
Wow. No, but we're glad you're here and thank you for sharing. And what, one thing that just like right off the top of my head struck me was like how cool it is. We're all here from different backgrounds. There's different reasons why we're doing what we're doing. And it may be because it's your family experience, or you've been in church world forever and then kind of grew into disability ministry, or like I love that you're not from church world, but you're from, working in the field of special education. Like that, I think it's so cool, and that makes us a better team, for helping each other and brainstorming and all that. So, so folks, let's open it up. Does anybody have any ideas for Andrea? And I mean, I think a lot of us are like, ooh, she could train our volunteers. With her background.
I'll just say I wasn't going to reply in the chat to Tina, but it's a little bit complicated. So the group that I exclusively work with these monthly gatherings, they are young adults. So they've aged out of the programming for, school age kids, and they can't really grasp or understand the college Bible study that happens. So they're kind of in this area where there's no real spot for them to fit in. So that's where I came in and created this event. But I also work, with 8-year-olds with ADHD that are having a hard time focusing in the traditional youth setting, and autism and all those other things that they don't necessarily need a little bit of support. So I work with tiny to like young adult. So if that answers any questions. And now, okay.
Right. Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. So I'm going to, Ryan, I think you had your hand raised, and then we'll get, Mercedes has a question as well.
Hi, Andrea. I'm Ryan. I just wanted to say there's a lot of ways to answer the question that you asked, but I think the simplest thing that I would encourage any church that's starting to think about disability is not to think of it as a new or novel activity that you're engaging in, but rather as a core continuation of the mission that the church has always had, which is to make disciples who make disciples. So there's a lot of directions you can go in. And I think the one thing you don't want to do is to try to offer things that people don't want or need. So beginning with getting a really good understanding of who's already at your church and what your church already values and does, and look for ways that you can create access to those things before branching out into secondary things. Because if you start with secondary things, it's harder to go back and add the primary things. But if you start with the primary things, you have a solid foundation that you can build on, and then have kind of novel activities that grow out of that. Does that kind of make sense as a philosophy?
Yes, I understand in theory, but
Right.
like you're saying, so I have kind of asked parents, and I spent the whole first 6 months of this job just like asking what the need was. And so the main thing was the young adult situation. So we got that covered. But you're saying start with foundation and then build up from there. What would you see as like a foundation or
I
something
think
to
the
start
foundation is whatever the church already does. Kind of the broad view that I have churches go through is just figuring out what does it mean to be a fully engaged, a fully active member at your church. And then you come up with a list of things, whether it's 5 or 10 or 3. And then you're just able to compare and say, what would a fully engaged young adult at our church look like? And then how engaged are the young adults with disabilities that we have in actuality? And if it's 3 out of 5 or 2 out of 5 or 1 out of 5, then the question becomes, what's preventing these other areas from them being engaged? And to me, that's just evidence of some kind of barrier. And it might be physical barrier, it might be a social barrier, but there's something that's preventing them from doing the rest of that. And so the danger you run into in having a separate novel disability ministry within the church is that you really wind up with 2 parallel churches that don't necessarily interact or cross. But if we operate off of that theological conviction that there is only one body of Christ, then we need to think about how to weave those 2 together. And there's definitely a space for a separate and unique disability ministry, but I think in service of bringing it back together. And the other thing that I would say for you with having such a strong professional background in disability is that can accidentally create false expectations among the church staff. So I think you're right to want to train the staff, because for me, the biggest predictor of whether a disability ministry is going to have legs or not is whether the church leadership is supportive of disability ministry as opposed to permissive. Because if it's like, oh, Andrea, you go do that thing over there, you're the expert, we're going to defer to you, that's not going to be sustainable long term. And it's also going to be putting a lot of things on you that probably need to be spread out and distributed, because nobody is gifted in every single way. And so being able to make ministry about ministry and have that first and foremost does 2 things. It puts the church leadership back in the driver's seat, where they're actually the one that's providing leadership, rather than being reactive and saying essentially, you tell us. That there is a mission and a vision that the church has, and a reason for its existence in a way that it makes disciples. And so if you can help them see how to make disciples of these young adults and to bring them into the parts of the church that are important, to find places to serve within the church, to find places to form relationships and friendships outside of that disability social sphere, I think that's the most important thing. And then once you get that, that's the foundation where you can then build off of. But when you build something separate, you run the risk of just building something separate. And that's what I've seen happen over and over again. And what I know you don't want to happen to your church is to have a separate program that kind of runs in a silo and then eventually will fall apart once you step away or somebody else steps away, because that's, I think, often the reality. But now I'm starting to ramble, so I'm gonna
Yeah,
stop.
you're
but
getting
does that
a
make
lot of
sense?
love in the chat, Ryan. So you're good.
Okay.
You're good. Yeah. So we have so much to cover here. So Mercedes, you have your hand up.
Hi, so I'm Mercedes. I'm from Florida. I'm part of Northland Church. And we're coming into kind of a new wave and stuff of what has been here as a platform. It's an amazing church from what I've been since I've started here. I'm originally from New York. So much to say. So with Andrea, like I hear you. It's I think and correct me if I'm wrong, like I hear you when you trying to start, it's about training, and you're right, what Ryan's saying, like absolutely, like we have to, it's always going back to what the message of God, and like and not kind of make it a parallel system. And I totally get that. But I think I also feel the pain of what Andrea is saying, is that when you do come from a background of special needs, and it's like that just a form of communication, when you talk about sensory input and how all these things come into play, or kids with ADHD, and how like just different strategies that we want to share. And it's that passion. It's like, I have this background, I do know, like how I want to help other our title holders have this beautiful relationship, that all it takes is to pass on these informations and these websites, and just create policies and trainings and sensitivity training and all this. So it's hard to derail, and I don't know what I'm trying to say, but I feel what you're trying to say. And sometimes it's like we are dealing with such a sensitive community, and it's like our passion, we want to protect them, and we want to protect from people that can't communicate with them. And it's like, we want to show you all this because, of course, at the end, the goal is for our families to have that respite time, and then for our community to communicate with us, like to pray. Like we just have this event, Boost in Faith Ability. It's first Saturday of every month. And like, just to see them, how joyous they are when we're singing and praising, and like they have that true Holy Spirit that is like, oh my God, like if everybody could just communicate with our kids, like it's an amazing experience. But I hear you, that I feel like I have that too. Like I have folders and binders, and I'm like, how do I get this out? How do I start? Please, Lord, please, like just throw a book under my door. I promise I won't open it. Like whoever wants to show me the way, I'll copy it, and just we can refocus on what the mission is, which is inclusion and praising the Lord and all that. So I don't know if any of that makes sense. I'm super nervous. First time I feel I'm really bad when it comes to talking in front of people, but I hear you. Like, and the question with policies is, that is not a focus, but I feel like just to protect our kids, like I think certain policies and just should be out there for our community. I don't know if I'm wrong, if anybody else feels the same. I don't know.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here, ladies. We are so glad that you came and joined us for the first time, and you did a great job. So I'm hearing a lot of different things. So let me kind of try to summarize a few of them. So the policies thing. So I'm, as part of a children's ministry staff at my church, and also as my key ministry role working with other churches, I really feel strongly that, and this is not just for your disability ministry, special needs, I'm using air quotes here, special needs ministry, whatever, but anytime you're working with kids or a vulnerable population, you really need to have those safety. I just feel very strongly that churches need to have the safety policies in place, and that's to protect your children, your youth, to protect your volunteers. So if your church doesn't already have some kind of policy, please work with your church leadership on that. So that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah.
But
they do, yeah, they do.
Pardon me?
I said, no, policies they have, I think it's just more with our vulnerable community, is like you're saying that like with our new towel holders that come in and staff, it's just that training piece and kind of like, we do need you to kind of sign certain documents, like, to protect and to kind of hold, and even though we don't want to exhaust our volunteers and towel holders, but certain documents we want to create, because it's like you have to follow certain processes, and you want to isolate a child who could be in a classroom, all they need is a buddy, and kind of all this kind of create systems. Maybe that's a better word, not policies. Policies we do have, absolutely, but it's more of a system, I think, that I'm trying to put together and say, okay, let's follow these procedures to kind of protect our community and better serve our families. Yeah.
Got it. All right. So Lauren, did you want to say anything? Do you want me to read some of what's in the chat? It's up to you.
Sure, I could just add, I am totally in agreement with what Ryan was saying about looking at those ways that your current ministries, whatever they are, need to be accessible to everyone. And that in just being on staff here as a special needs coordinator for the last year, that's really been what my focus has been. Yes, we're trying to meet the needs of some of the populations or specific children that are coming into program, but looking at every one of the ministries as a church as a whole to say, hey, what are obstacles? What are the barriers that are not allowing this to be accessible? The other part is really, and this was a big learning curve for me too, coming on, is understanding the theology of disability and the value that everyone brings in. And I mean, we could go into a whole long spiel on that, but that's also been what my role has been with everyone that I'm communicating with, whether it's the senior pastor or the youth leader, and then trying to help develop that so that, as Ryan said, everybody's fully engaged, whether it's not just participating or seeing these people that happen to have disabilities or impacted by disabilities coming into our program and feeling that they have needs we need to fulfill, but how are they serving? How are they worshiping? And enabling that to happen and having that expectation across the board. And, we have a older gentleman who's in his 70s, who's blind and teaches one of our children's churches. When he first came and said, this is what he did, we were like, how does that happen? And he wanted preschool students. We're like, how does a blind man teach preschool? Like, how does that happen? And it's a beautiful thing to see it and being open to that and really coaching and helping parents that had kids in that class, the children's ministry leaders, the other people involved to say, hey, let's see how this works. And there are different supports that obviously needed for that to happen. The role of the assistant in the class is completely different. They have to basically narrate everything that's happening in the class. So I had to do some training for those people that were volunteering in there. They have to say, oh, we have this new student here. Oh, 3 more people are finishing their project. You know what I mean? It's just a whole different role. So I don't see it so much as trying to make new things happen, but what has God provided you, and how do you make sure that everything you're doing is allowing full accessibility? That whole 5 stages thing, I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I use that tool all the time. Do you know what I'm talking about, Beth?
Yes.
And I've used that with our individual staff. I've used that for myself. I've used that with volunteers. It's just a great 1-page kind of theology tool and vision. So you're on the right track. It's great. I totally agree with everything Ryan said.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing. That's great stuff. And Catherine, I'm going to put you on the spot. Okay. Are you ready? So part of what Catherine works really hard with Key Ministry is to help churches kind of break down some of those barriers when it comes to mental health in the church. So Catherine, do you want to talk a little bit about like what this looks like kind of from your perspective?
Sure. I mean, let's just have an example of, maybe a kid who is on the spectrum and has really significant anxiety. So, some things that are, people with anxiety basically overestimate the fear of the unknown. They think that it's going to be something terrible, and it's not necessarily going to be anything terrible. So that's a barrier that needs to be broken down. And something that we advocate for churches to do is to put it right there on your website that you are available to let people come see the church during the week when there's not a lot of people there, so that the fear that can come with too many new people in a new situation is eliminated, that it's just a new situation that can be addressed with a parent or someone who's an employee at the church that is already known to the child or to the adult, whatever the case is. And so just taking steps to be able to eliminate that fear factor can go a long way towards helping people recognize that, yeah, they can come into this in a more hectic situation and still, it can be a positive environment. So that's just one example of some things that we advocate. Another one is that you want to have as much video content and pictures as possible on your website, so that people who, again, using that anxiety example, so that they understand what it is that they're going to be stepping into that first time they come to church. What do the rooms look like? What does the entrance look like? Is it super crowded? Is there, there are not very many people? Those kinds of things can be very meaningful for somebody who's really just very uncomfortable in new situations, to the point where they avoid new situations.
The point being, it's not creating this separate ministry environment or this separate ministry plan or anything, but it's helping the whole church, helping individuals maybe that have anxiety or what have you, be able to fully participate and be full members of the body of Christ by just making some of these little accommodations, not creating a whole separate.
That's right. It's not necessarily absolutely not necessarily a staff person or a whole new program. It's not any of those things. It's really more of a holistic view of everything that you're doing to make sure that that somebody who wants to be there, that they're going to be able to navigate being in your church environment or in your small group or whatever church kind of event or setting that you're offering. So just one other quick thing before I am finished, but the another thing that we talk about a lot is universal design, which I know probably many of you are this concept that you're familiar with, and it's basically what works for one works for all. And so a lot of the kinds of things that we advocate for could really be considered universal design, because they help eliminate those barriers that may only exist in the anxiety that somebody is struggling with, but to that person it's a very real barrier and constraint. So we're it's kind of like the four friends who pulled up the roof thatch to be able to get their friend to Jesus. We're just moving some roof thatch out of the way of some folks who have it that maybe the rest of us don't.
That's good stuff. Thank you. Ryan.
You were talking about anxiety, and I just wanted to point out that as much as we think about the barriers that keep people with disabilities from coming to the church, that we have to be aware of the barriers that church leaders might experience when moving towards people with disabilities. And I think that anxiety piece for them is a big one, of not wanting to say or do the wrong thing, and having that idea that this is something that experts do. And so I often find myself saying, people, when you say to them, come volunteer in the disability ministry here, what they hear you say is, are you an expert on disability? And that creates barriers for them to move forward there too. So I hope you don't feel called out, but I wouldn't even use phrases like universal design, because that sounds expert. And precise and technical. And when you explain what it is, everyone's like, oh yeah, of course, obviously we should move towards those things. But just being aware, especially Andrea, because of your professional background, if you find yourself using acronyms, stop. If you're using terms that have technical explanations, try your best to remove those barriers for everybody else, to say that this is just a very normal human thing, rather than something that requires letters after your name and years of schooling, because that will help make that mutually permeable access, not just one-way access.
Yeah, that's great. And it kind of brings me back to the story that Julie told us at the beginning of this call, where the volunteer who was really nervous, and because she maybe thought it was outside of her, area of expertise or whatever. So having said that, we're going to go back to get the Meekins' other story, but I want to mention that Ryan shared in the chat the link to the 5 stages thing that Lauren had talked about, plus a YouTube video, and I don't know what that is, but I'm guessing it's related to that. So we'll put those in when we post the video, we will put those links in there. Before we jump back to the Meekins, does anybody else have a question or something they want to share? Jennifer.
Hi, I just wanted to share that I got connected with a ministry. I don't know if I'm allowed to share the name of that ministry. Is that appropriate?
If you want to promote it, you can.
Okay. I got connected with Johnny and Friends, the Institute on Disability, and I'm going to train to be an instructor for their Beyond Suffering certification.
Okay.
And I'm really emotional because I'm really excited. I feel like this is a way that I can participate, where it's using my gifts and my talents without putting me in a sensory situation that's different, that's like going to be dangerous for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm going to go visit the main building on Wednesday with my husband and my service dog, and check it out and get a tour. And yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys, and I'm just really excited to learn and to teach a theology of disability, which is what I've felt so strongly about the past few years. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'm pointing at Ryan because he's here on my screen, but we're big fans of Johnny and Friends. So
This is where you're going to be coming.
Yeah, there you go.
Actually, probably not. It'll probably be the other building, but whatever.
All right. Well, Meekins, why don't you bring us home?
Okay, so I just wanted to say to Andrea and Mercedes too, you are not alone. And the fact that you are here in this little idea share time frame will help you to understand that we are here for you. So, and we know that you have something for us too. So don't feel like you're just, out there all by yourself trying to figure out how on earth do I pull these things together. There are lots of resources, and you start with Key Ministry because they have a ton of things. Just go to the website and look at all their fun things that will just give you the right mindset to get you going. So, and I'm blessed by both of you and your desire to do so. So, okay, so we talked about that word reimagined. So the people in our Central Virginia area decided that they wanted to reimagine the prom. And so I heard you talking, Sylvia, about how you guys did that at your church. And this is what they did. There were 3 organizations that came together and decided that they wanted to do it together because it was too much for any one of them to do, the people that were involved in leadership in these 3 different organizations. So they came together. Each community invited their own people to one location. Each community had their people sit together. And then everyone was familiar with the community, which cut down on that stranger anxiety that often is the case, right? They did not go and have a separate little way to love on the caregivers. They invited the caregivers to participate as part of the volunteer system. So they were with their people because they knew their people really well. So they didn't have to go finding 100 people to, figure out how are we going to put this thing together. So I thought this was fascinating when I heard the director telling us all about this. We didn't get to go because we didn't find out about it until after it was over. I was very sad about that, but next year, there's next year. The place was a beautiful wedding venue. And it's owned by some people in our church, and they loan it out for events like this. For different things that leadership teams at our church, they'll go to this beautiful place and have like little retreats. And so they decided they wanted to do something for people with disabilities. And then this all came together. So they had a nice dinner, and then they had 2 sessions of music where they could move around. That's probably the best way to describe that. Because the word dance is not something that some of those folks want to say. And I think, well, I won't tell you what I think. So anyway, so they get to move, right? In 2 different sessions of music, let's put it that way. So, and one of them, they were given these LED foam sticks that were multicolored. And so they got to flash their wands around. So everybody got to do that. No matter what your disability was, they got to be able to have a wand and flash it around. And it was really cool. And they were so happy. I saw pictures and the smiles were eternal. And then the other time of movement was a conga line. But it wasn't dancing, it was a conga line around the room. And so everybody was happy that could participate in that. There were wheelchairs being pushed in that conga line. It was awesome. And they had some picture sets available, so you could take pictures of people that you met there that were new, and then also your community. And then they only had 6 weeks to pull this thing together because they had a hard, fast date. And they did it. They just did it. And so it was just a beautiful time together. And I can't wait to go next year and be a part of all of that. So reimagining is a really good thing to do.
Here, here, I agree. So that's a great story. And yeah, I love anytime organizations or, community, whatever, can partner together. I love that idea. I think, I just think there's just so many possibilities. So I think that's a great way to end. So we're going to end for today. I want to let you know that we normally do a disability ministry video roundtable on the 3rd Wednesday of each month. We're actually not going to do one this month. We've got a little too much going on over here. So we will see a bunch of you at the conference in Cleveland, April 28th and 29th. And if you're not going to be there, we will miss you. You'll be able to catch our main stage presentations on our Facebook page. But we look forward to seeing you again on the Idea Share for May, which will be the first Monday in May at noon Eastern. So thank you all. Blessings to everyone on this Holy Week. I know everybody's busy, but hopefully you can take some time, to personally grow in your faith as well. So, all right. Bye, everybody.